So I spent a while thinking about how to mount the new smaller pulley, which is 6 rib instead of 7 rib, and I think I've settled on a solution. So the first step was getting the smaller magnet mounted flush to the supercharger, and here it is. It took some dremeling, some clearancing of this notch that already existed at the bottom for the larger magnets wiring. So once that was expanded, I was able to put it in flush, put the C-clip in, and that's great. I was also interested to see what kind of a seal was behind this pulley, and the answer is no seal at all. So this thing basically just, I think it acts a little bit like a dust cover, but more importantly, it is this rigid mount for the pulley itself, since the pulley rides on this sleeve and is kind of secured with that nut. So that is how that sits. The pulley can be slid right onto there. So that leaves the last step of putting the clutch onto just the splines of the rotor. And that slides right on, and then it gets secured by a nut. The issue is, because it's a 6 rib and not a 7 rib, this pulley is way narrower and it doesn't reach nearly as far towards the clutch. So I was kind of agonizing over, like, how do I space the pulley forwards or the pulley and the magnet forwards on this flange? And I think I've arrived at my solution. So this, the way it fits onto here, there's really no good way to make this slide further in against the pulley. So instead we do need to pull the pulley forwards, and I think what I want to do is actually pull it towards with the entire flange. So as I pulled forward there, a gap formed for all 5 of those bolts. I think I could put washers in here and basically get the pulley to clutch clearance that I want, kind of similar to what the AC compressor would have. Maybe making a gasket just to help seal the perimeter, but using those washers to space the entire flange off. Okay, so the next little experiment I was running is with the old magnet or coil. If I send 14 plus volts to it, you'll see that it draws 3.8 amps and about 56 watts of power. Now we can repeat that with the new coil, which is right over here. And you get 3.6 amps, 52 watts. So almost the same value here. So that gives me some hope that the magnetic force between these two should be the same. And the main difference, if any, is just going to be, let's say, the diameter where that force is applied, but also that spacing to the clutch. So if I can control at least the spacing to the clutch, I have a pretty good feeling about running this pulley with the stock amount of force. So I've just installed my sort of wide open throttle kickdown switch. This is a simple momentary push button switch that I've put into the base of the pedal, and the wire comes out to here, and I'm going to wire it in parallel with my current on-off switch. So if either one is pressed, the supercharger will be engaged. Just finished up the new wiring, which involves a couple of relays to control the throttle body and the supercharger clutch, with the supercharger clutch also being controlled by the new foot pedal. Can't really see it, but yeah. So let's start her up. Proof of concept. So what we have is the ability to rev with no supercharger, the ability to trigger the supercharger clutch only at the bottom of the pedal travel, and the ability to force the supercharger on. So pretty cool. And then this is just forced off. I've just completed the wiring into the throttle body, so I've got positive and negative going to the motor. I've tested to confirm that when you send that power, that's when the throttle opens, so that will be opened whenever the supercharger is off. Then I've also got these coolant lines. So because they're identical throttle bodies, I saw the coolant lines running through and I just plumbed them in series. So I know that there's some emissions reason for the coolant lines to like warm up the throttle body or something like that. I mostly just want to keep it cool because if I'm going to be driving it around with the supercharger off most of the time, except when like wide open, I don't want this thing to burn out. Next up, let's test that the throttle wiring is correct. So for that, we don't need the supercharger on. We'll just give it ignition power. And then we'll go back out and could have planned a little bit in advance here, but I need to more or less unplug and confirm that it moves back. There we go. Hear that? This is fully open. That's fully closed. And then let's activate the supercharger. I heard a click and confirm it's active. Now let's unhook this again. No change. Good. It remains fully closed while the supercharger is on. So yeah, time for a test drive. All right, so here we go. First test drive with the new switch and the pedal switch. So right now I'm just driving in NA mode. So when I floor it, we get atmospheric pressure and good acceleration because of the new opening throttle body. Pretty nice. Now let's go into the pedal switch mode. So like that. So I still have NA performance until I hit that switch, and then fairly rapidly the supercharger clutch begins to spin and the throttle shuts because power is killed to the motor. So I'm going to try to slam it as hard as I can so that you can maybe hear my foot. So it almost resembles turbo lag because the boost actually takes a little while to build. The charge pipe fairly large, you got the whole intercooler, so I think it takes a few revolutions of the supercharger to pressurize that volume before the engine can start to take it in. So I'm pretty happy with how that works. It does mean like half a second to a second of delay, but that also means a less abrupt engagement of the supercharger clutch. It also means that the throttle kind of closing without power, not being, slammed shut with reverse voltage, is no big deal. So it really just kind of feels like a turboed car in a way. So I'm very happy with that. And then if the delay is unacceptable for some reason, I can always just pull up on the switch the rest of the way. And now we're in full-time supercharged mode. So you've got nearly instant throttle response every time you floor it. So, but yeah, I'm really excited to kind of get to know the car some more with the pedal activated switch. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this episode. Next episode, I'm looking forward to putting together some fuel system upgrades, which will help support the smaller pulley. So I do eventually want to push the full, 5 to 7 PSI. I'm also curious just to see, does the 7 PSI pulley actually make 7 PSI? Like 7 PSI is purely based on my calculations, so it could be less for sure, which would be easier on the engine. So, but yeah, so the next few steps, I've got some SDI injectors coming in, a higher flow fuel pump. Gonna do those swaps. Hopefully they aren't gonna be too much of a headache. And then I'll retune the car for the new injectors with the current pulley installed, and then hopefully install the smaller pulley, and then we can see some more boost or maybe a connecting rod flying out of the engine. So, but yeah, stay tuned, and thanks for watching.